Uh, I forgot about the time he had a mullet. Does anybody look good with a mullet? Oh. Hey guys. You know, Linkara, Louis Lovog from Atop the Fourth Wall, he said that he doesn't think maximum clonage sucks. And here's the thing. I've looked through this book thoroughly, and I'm not going to say that it sucks, but it's one of the most frustrating reads I've ever had to go through. Bar none. Out of any comic book I've read. Maybe it's the fact that there's elements within the story that don't exactly make a lot of sense. From both a comic book perspective and also from a perspective of canon. Maybe it's the fact that there's too much arguing amongst the heroes as they try to stop Carnage. Maybe it's the fact that the artwork can range from really good to really bad, and sometimes within the span of a single issue. Maybe it's because the plot is pretty simplistic, and it's pretty much the same thing repeated over and over. Carnage is out killing people, they have to stop him. Maybe it's the fact that there's just too many characters, and the story just drags on far too long over too many issues, especially for so simple a plot. Or maybe it's the fact that it's not one of these things, but all of them together that make it such a frustrating read. Here's the thing. There are good elements within. Honestly, there are. But the problem is that so much of the good potential in here is buried beneath this mountain of malformed... So, join me as I talk about the 5 most frustrating and the 5 best parts of Maximum Carnage. Or rather, as I start out this list, Maximum Garbage. Number 5. Most of you probably already know the story of Venom, how Eddie Brock bonded with the alien symbiote that Peter Parker had once wore in order to get revenge on Peter for what he felt was ruining his life. However, during an escape from a jail he was in, a part of the symbiote costume was left behind, and it bonded with a psychopathic murderer named Cletus Cassidy. Now, unlike Eddie, who actually does have something of a moral code, and at least tries, keyword being tries, to prevent the suffering of innocence whenever he can, Cletus doesn't have any moral code. He's insane. He's crazy. He's a complete lunatic who is a complete and utter sociopath with no regards for mercy or empathy. During the Maximum Carnage event, Carnage somehow manages to get free and joins up with various other villains in an attempt to essentially wreak havoc and anarchy all throughout the city. And they range from Shriek, a villainess who has the ability to fire blasts of sound energy, Spider-Man's evil bestial doppelganger, the Demo Goblin, and Carrion, a failed genetic experiment with a decaying touch. And that's pretty much the whole plot. This huge-ass miniseries, it can basically be summed up to Carnage and his friends are killing people, Spider-Man and his friends try to stop them. That's it. The same thing over and over and over. For dragged out way too long. And when I say way too long, I'm not exaggerating. It goes for over 10 issues. I am not kidding. It says right here on the back, it's dragged out through Amazing Spider-Man 378 through 380, Spectacular Spider-Man 201 through 203, Spider-Man 35 through 37, Spider-Man Unlimited number 1 and number 2, and Web of Spider-Man 101 through 104. That's over a dozen issues devoted to the same basic plot of a psychopathic guy wearing an alien symbiote costume going around a city and slaughtering people for poops and giggles. You know, maybe you could draw this out for, I don't know, 5 comics, maybe? But over a dozen, like, for 14 issues? It's just such a weak, shoddy plot to build a 14-issue series around. Number 4. There's too many characters! It'd be easier to keep track of all the 101 Dalmatians! Let's just take the villains. Carnage, Shriek, Demogoblin, Doppelganger, Carrion. Okay, fine. We can have a bunch of villains. I don't mind that. But then we get into the many, many heroes that have been shoved into this long, long miniseries. Spider-Man, Black Cat, Venom, Cloak and Dagger, Firebird, Captain America, Iron Fist, Deathlock, Nightwatch, Morbius. Oh, for the love of God! There's just too many characters to follow here. Not to mention the fact that a lot of people who would be reading this would have no idea who quite a few of these characters are. Okay, maybe you'd probably know Spider-Man. You'd probably know Venom. You'd probably know Captain America. You might know Carnage. You might know a couple of the other characters. But seriously, Deathlock, Nightwatch, I don't know who those guys are, and I'm like a huge comic book nerd. And I could barely even remember that Spider-Man had a bestial doppelganger. And if I, the nerd, am having trouble remembering who these guys are and where they come from, can you imagine how people back in the 90s would have reacted to having all these characters they had to try and keep track of and had no idea where they came from? Not to mention the fact that a lot of these guys just popped out of nowhere, just entering the comic willy-nilly with, like, no real build-up whatsoever. I mean, Carrion crawled out of a sewer and just entered the comic in, like, a single panel. Okay, a single page, but the point being, everybody just shows up suddenly. It's just too much. That's the problem. Number 3. The art. Just the art. Sometimes it looks good, sometimes it looks bad and cluttered and messy. And there's a lot of times where it looks cluttered and messy and just plain ugly, and I'm pretty sure human spines aren't supposed to bend that way, and oh my God, what's wrong with your face? Number 2. The inconsistent writing, both in the tone and how the characters are acting. There's moments where, well, the characters seem in character. I insist you show my best side to the public. From the inside out! It's funny because he made a joke about eating that guy alive. But then we get lines like, "Your pathetic arrogance, fools, will be your very downfall!" I mean, God, he sounds like Dr. Doom. And then there's lines like, oh, you gotta be freaking kidding me. Just 'cause you think you got power, you think you're always right. You, Mr. Screw Things Up for Funsies, is gonna try to take the moral high ground. Do you see what I'm getting at with the tone and the way the writing is all over the place over the span of 14 issues? And for people to try and claim that the story was meant to show that the overly violent era of the 90s was bad, the authors and creators show far too much needless violence. Bodies are literally lining the streets in this story. This is hammered into us over and over again as the entire city devolves into absolute chaos. We don't need continuous reminders about how sick these people are, how much damage they've done. We get it. Seeing this hammered in over and over again just feels like it's overindulgence, and it stops becoming commentary and starts becoming, well, kind of like exploitation. It crosses the line. But that's not the worst part of this story. This is the most frustrating part of Maximum Carnage. Number 1. The bullcrap out of nowhere, makes no sense plot twists. First things first, Carnage somehow turns back into Carnage, even though the first story he appeared in ended with the symbiote being destroyed. Supposedly, somehow Cletus Cassidy can just regenerate another symbiote with his blood. That doesn't even begin to make sense. Then we get the whole thing about why New York has suddenly turned into a bunch of rioting, psychopathic lunatics who are showing no regard for the law. You want to know why everybody is going crazy? And no, it's not because 2 mass murderers are on the loose with a bunch of flunkies. No. The actual answer is far stupider. You see, Shriek can somehow use her sound powers to get inside of people's heads, send out sick vibes that can make people go crazy. Seriously. And supposedly, this was helped along by the fact that earlier in the series, she got into a fight with Cloak and Dagger, and because she stumbled into Cloak's dark dimension, that somehow unlocked this power in her. A power she never had before, and would never, ever show again.
No. And of course, my own personal favorite of all time, man falling off of a cliff. No! No!
The entire premise of the stupid story is based around the idea that the entire city has fallen apart because of evil mind control from a woman that couldn't do this before, did not have the power to do this before, will never ever have the power to do it again, and this explanation comes right the hell out of nowhere. This is a barrel of... Oh, and I almost forgot. Dagger had somehow gotten killed randomly earlier in the series, and yet somehow magically comes back to life from within the folds of his cape.
What the hell was that?
And then, of course, there's the happy gun. No, seriously, it's called a happy gun. It floods our villains with cheery, good, and fuzzy emotions. Carrion gets turned back to normal. Demogoblin realizes how much of a hypocrite he is. Shriek gets all cheery and fuzzy, and she feels good for once in her life. And Carnage, who the mere idea of kindness and compassion is so alien to him, evidently blows up. From a deus ex machina that was never mentioned once before in the entire series, which comes right the hell out of nowhere and is completely contrived. Do you see why I hate this story? This came completely out of the writer's ass. And you know what? I get it, okay? I get the idea you were trying to go for. The idea of getting Carnage and the villains to actually feel empathy and all the emotions they'd never felt before. All the things they dismissed as lies and nonsense being used as a weapon against them. That is a good idea, but its execution. This is the problem with the entire story. Good ideas, bad execution. Very bad execution. And that's why this is so frustrating and so disappointing. What could have been? The art fluctuates too much. The characterization fluctuates too much. The plot is one thing repeated over and over with Carnage killing people and they need to stop him. And it drags out for far too long. But, like I said, there are good parts to this story. And I'm going to talk about those good parts the next time I upload a video. So, till next time.